The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Training Camp Confidential. Back after the preseason debacle that was Friday's 48-18 performance versus the New England Patriots. Commanders hit the practice field yesterday. I'm going to talk about what was said yesterday by head coach Dan Quinn and quarterback Jaden Daniels. But a lot has transpired since Friday's game. And when you have a performance like that, maybe you need to make a statement to the rest of your team that this is unacceptable. Heads rolled a bit. One big surprise in the mix. Very interesting stuff. So we'll go over the timeline of yesterday's events because it all makes sense now. But because our guys move in silence, which we love, we never know exactly what's going on. But when things start to happen and when the ball starts to go in motion, the ears should perk up if you're a fan of this team because something's about to transpire. And a lot of times we have absolutely no clue what it is. So we'll talk about the big move that was made today. Obviously, you guys already know. And let me just start by saying I was wrong about this because I believe it was Rio and myself on the Commanders Kings channel maybe a week or two ago that Rio said that he thought Dom Hampton could get cut. And I said, they're not cutting any of the draft picks from the last 2 years. These are foundational pieces, guys, that they want to try to build around. Now, granted, it's much different when you're talking about a late round pick. Dominique Hampton is a 6th round pick from the 2024 draft class. That's not a guy that has to be here. That's not a guy that has to be a part of the foundation moving forward. You're more so talking about guys in the first 4 rounds or so, maybe the 5th round. I think they really, really see a lot in Jordan McGee. He's got to be healthy, obviously, which has not been the case over the first year and some change of his career. But I think they see a lot of promise in Dominique Hampton, in Jordan McGee. Clearly, they did not in Dominique Hampton. We'll talk about that here in a second. But I just didn't see them cutting anybody from either one of those draft classes. And the fact that they did that, I absolutely love it. Love the fact that they can admit, hey, we made a mistake here. We got this one wrong, and not try to force it, but rather say, how do we pivot, not continue to pour resources into the mistake that was made and move forward? Admitting that there's a problem is the first step on the road to recovery, right? A lot of people miss that step, right? They don't want to admit they made a mistake. And so I love the fact that they said, well, yeah, we made a mistake here. You know, we drafted a guy at the safety position, tried to convert him to linebacker. It didn't work. We got to move on. We can't keep wasting time here. Because after the game, I said, I didn't really see anything from Dominique Hampton. I'm going to be honest with you. Didn't see anything. I told you that after the game. But I didn't think that meant he was going to get cut. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know that equated to, oh, yeah, he's about to get cut. I just like, hey, I didn't see anything from Dom Hampton on Friday night. You know, he didn't move the needle for me. I saw some flashes from Kane Madrano. I said, okay, I see why they did what they did with him. I didn't see anything from Dominique Hampton. Not one thing. He didn't jump off the screen. There were times where he was out there and I didn't even know he was on the field. So clearly they've been disappointed. And that wasn't just a Friday thing, by the way. Let's keep this in its proper perspective. They didn't cut him because he didn't play well on Friday. We haven't seen anything from you all camp long. We've been disappointed all camp long. The light bulb isn't coming on. We don't see any progress being made, and we don't think you're going to actually be what we hoped you would turn into. This wasn't a Friday transgression, release. This was all training camp long. Dominique Hampton has failed to flash. And Friday was the tipping point. It was the last straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And that was the way that they decided to go. So let's talk about the the chain of events yesterday, because things went in a really interesting order yesterday that prompted the moves that were made. And again, we didn't know what was to transpire, but let's go over some things. So before we get to what practice was yesterday, what was said before and after practice yesterday, as we always do, let's first go and handle some housekeeping affairs. All right. So I'm going to just stick with some of the beat reporters, even though some of the national guys picked up some of this stuff. I like to give the beat reporters here locally a little bit of love. Nikki Javala tweeted out a bunch of stuff yesterday. Here are the most two important tweets that she had, for me at least, during the course of the day. Yesterday, she tweeted out, not at Commanders practice, Marcus Mariota, Noah Brown, Brandon Coleman, Jordan McGee, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Kayvon Seymour, Viliami Fehoko, and Bobby Price. She also adds, and Kazmir Allen is wearing a black no-contact jersey. Okay, so what that effectively means is either those guys were banged up, which that pretty much means all those guys were banged up, and Kazmir Allen, who is practicing, is banged up, but he's able to participate just in a non-contact fashion, right? So as we talked about, we didn't have any major setbacks on Friday night, but we did sustain a few injuries, guys that, were in camp. None of them to guys that we are going to be relying on, right? Like Bobby Price got a concussion. You never want to see anybody, get hurt, period. But Bobby Price had a concussion, had to leave the game, did not return. Viliami Fehoko turned his ankle in the game. So you saw guys get injured. Kayvon Seymour got hurt in the game. And then all the other guys, the other five guys, Mariota, Brown, Coleman, McGee, and Baptiste, all didn't make the trip to New England in the first place. So they're still nursing their injuries. A name that is very, noticeably absent is one Dominique Hampton. And again, he could have not been out there, and Nikki Javala just didn't mention him. But football is such a nasty sport, man. Because here's the last thing I want to do, right? The last thing I want to do, if you're going to cut me, which they knew they were going to cut Dom Hampton. Now, maybe there would have been no one at the practice that stood out to them and they weren't going to make the transaction right now. So in their defense, that exists, right? Because the tryout was after practice. So we're going to get to that in a second. Something that was more important to me than any of the stuff that Nikki just tweeted in that first tweet was this second tweet. Ja'Cory, Bill, Krosky, Merritt, and Luke McCaffrey are out here. Both left Friday's game early. Remember, I said I wasn't sure as to why Luke McCaffrey didn't play more. He literally caught a horrible wide receiver screen on the first possession of the game. It should have been a 9-yard loss. It ended up being like a 1 or 2 yard loss. He may have gotten back to the line of scrimmage. It was a horribly constructed play. It was to the short side of the field. I hated every aspect of it. It was dead on arrival, I said. And then we didn't see Luke again. And I was like, that was weird. Luke's not established to the point where he shouldn't be out there at least the entirety of the first half, like a number of guys were. And he should be getting as many reps as he can, trying to get his weight up against some of these dudes who won't be in the league and get his shit off. That's what I was thinking. Well, we got confirmation as to why he wasn't out there. He wasn't feeling well. And I think I mentioned this in passing. It was a throwaway line. I'm like, we don't know if he was sick or anything. Because remember, some of the guys didn't make the trip. And I'm like, we don't know what their situation is. We don't know if they're sick. We don't know if they're dealing with something. Most of these guys are dealing with some sort of injury. But you just don't know, right? Because they don't give us any information. And that's a good thing, right? So Luke leaving the game based off of him having an illness, it checks, right? That makes sense now, because it didn't make sense that he didn't play a ton in the game. That didn't make sense to me. So it was good to hear that he was back out there a couple of days later. And it was good to hear that Bill was out there, because that's the only thing that I cared about after the game on Friday was, hey, is Bill good? Because he didn't return the game. And I told you at halftime, he went into the tent right before halftime because he was in on that 2-minute drive. And he had the 2 catches. The first one was negated due to a Bobby Hart penalty. And the second one, he got injured on. And he went into the tent. They checked for, I think, a concussion, if I had to guess. He said, I think, as a matter of fact, I think we later found out it was his shoulder. Somebody spoke to him, and he said he landed on his shoulder a little rough. They wanted to go check it out. He was fine. And so good to hear that he was back at practice, because he was one of the bright spots on a night where there weren't many. He was one of the few bright spots on Friday night. Need him to stay healthy. He's one of the reasons why this preseason is worth watching, because we're going to get the starters this upcoming week against Cincinnati. And then we're putting those guys away till week 1 against the Giants. So I need Bill to stay healthy, because he's one of the reasons why this preseason is worth watching. And he's one of the guys we want to see continue to grow with every opportunity that he gets, because we think he has a chance to be a contributor this year, and a major one at some point throughout the course of this rookie season of his. So that was big news, right? So we got all this information as practice first kicked off. DQ told us some things at the press conference. We'll talk about what he said. He didn't give us too much from an injury standpoint, because they were still kind of evaluating things. He said he'd give us a better update on Monday, which is today. He said that after the game on Friday, he gave a little bit of an update, but nothing major, right? More so talked about it being salute to service Sunday and all of that stuff. And, thank everyone for their service, which we all do. And we really didn't know. He gave us the Luke McCaffrey update, though. That was big. So we were able to then kind of make sense of him not playing, right? As much on Friday. So then you go from there to this nugget we get. The Commanders are working out players after practice. They're going to work out some guys. And DQ told us that at the press conference before practice. So we knew, okay, they're going to work some guys out. And, they had some injuries, obviously. Maybe some of the guys that are injured, DQ told us it wasn't serious, but maybe it's a little bit more serious than he's leading on. So you're still trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together. But we initially were told they're working out 7 guys, right? That was the initial conversation, is they're working out 7 guys, right? So at first, we were led to believe that they're working out 7 dudes. And I was like, yeah, they may sign one, may sign no one, right? It's like, it's not a big deal. Then we later find out that it's not 7. It's double that number. It's 14 guys that are working out. And this was the list of the 14 guys. Defensive end, Amare Barno, remember him from Virginia Tech, blazed the combine like 3 years ago, ran like a 4.3, 140 or something crazy like that as a defensive end. But he was like 230 something pounds. He was like tiny. You know what I mean? So usually guys that do that at the combine don't pan out to be anything in the NFL. So clearly he's already on the streets, and, interesting. But again, he doesn't, if you can't have TJ Magg and Amari Barno both on your team. You can only have one of those guys. Jeremiah Martin, 2 defensive ends they worked out, right? Okay, cool. That could be a sign that Javonte John Baptiste's injury may be a little bit more serious than they're leading on, and they want to bring in another defensive end to fill that void. That's what I thought initially. We're going to find out why they did that, right? Isang Bassi, an NFL vet that's been around the block a couple of times. He's been in the league for a while now. Antonio Hamilton, same can be said for him. And Ken H. Lovely, all guys that worked out as defensive backs, mostly corners. Offensive line, Lester Cotton, John Ligulu, and Tashawn Manning were all offensive linemen that they worked out. And then linebackers, quite a few here. Nicholas Morrow, that's an NFL vet and a name we've heard quite a bit. Tanner Muse, if you don't remember, that's the guy that was highly athletic from Clemson, but he couldn't really move, right? He was a straight line guy that drafted by the Raiders. Ronnie Perkins, that's a OU linebacker. Duke Riley is a guy that has tons of NFL experience. And if I'm not mistaken, he may have gotten the back end of DQ in Atlanta because he was drafted by the Falcons out of LSU once upon a time. He may have crossed paths with DQ when he was in Atlanta. That's my guess. I'd have to go back and cross-reference that. But his career started in Atlanta because DQ was really keen on those LSU linebackers at the time because he had so much success with Deion Jones. And Duke Riley was solid, right? Sione Takitaki, he's been in the league a little while too. We've seen him spin the block a couple of times. And O'Shane Eximides, you should remember him from the Giants. I remember him, obviously, because he went to Old Dominion University. So these are all guys that they brought in here for workouts. And, you know, you're thinking, all right, this probably has something to do with maybe one or two of the injuries from the game. And then you got some guys that didn't make the trip that might have injuries that they want to take it slow with. And you want to fill those, you know, voids in camp, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm like, that doesn't really jive because just because those guys are injured, they're still on the roster. You can't just fill their roster spot with guys unless you put them on some sort of list. None of those guys have been placed on any list. So technically their roster spots still exist. So something's going on here. So, you know, we're trying to make sense of it. Maybe they're going to do something. Maybe they just want to take a look, see. They're not going to do anything, right? So then we find out yesterday, shortly after this workout, that they're going to sign Duke Riley, linebacker. Oh, okay. That must mean that the injury to our guy, Jordan McGee, is a little bit more serious than they're leading on. Uh-oh, that's not good. They feel like they got to sign a veteran to come in here. Keep in mind, if you look at our linebacker room, there's no veteran depth behind the two vets that start. Keep in mind, you're not going to ask 36-year-old Nick Bellore to play defensive snaps. He's a special teams ace and guru only. So you remove those three guys from the mix, and you look at the other three guys that they had behind them as depth. It's Jordan McGee, it's Dom Hampton, and it's Kane Madrano. You're talking about a second-year guy, two second-year guys, and a rookie. And I think they looked around and they said, what's wrong with this picture? Because last year, you got to remember, we may not have loved him, but at least they had Michael Walker as a veteran at the linebacker position. He wasn't any good, but at least it was a veteran, somebody you could trust to put in the game, even if they weren't going to get the job done. You knew they weren't going to blow assignment just from a mental standpoint. They just weren't good enough to actually get the job done, right? So in our minds, I can't speak for you. In my mind, I was probably more so thinking this had something to do with the five guys that didn't make the trip, that had injuries. I'm thinking JPB, you know, JJB, excuse me. He may be hurt a little bit more. And Jordan McGee might be hurt a little bit more than they're leading on, right? Then late last night, it was released that the team also signed Isang Bassi, who you see here as a defensive back. He's more of a corner. And I'm like, interesting. And then, so, you know, I'm thinking, okay, this one is for Bobby Price. Right? That's what I told myself. Okay, Bobby Price, concussion. They may put him on IR, end his season. Isang Bassi comes in here and he'll take his spot, right? That's what I was thinking. Here's what it all amounted to is the Commanders officially put out a press release this morning citing their roster moves. So I talked about Isang Bassi getting signed late last night. Antonio Hamilton Sr. also was signed, along with Duke Riley. So we knew about 2 of the 3 guys. Antonio Hamilton is added to this list of guys who they ultimately signed. Now, we didn't know, okay, obviously if they're signing 3 guys, there are corresponding moves with those signings to free up the space to allow these guys to, again, we're at 90. 91, if you add in IPP player TJ Mag, we're at 91 already. You can't sign someone without releasing someone. There has to be a corresponding move. So in a corresponding move to allow these guys to be signed onto the roster, Vladimir Fiocco Jr. was cut. He sustained an ankle injury. I kept asking, why is he here? He was here all last year on the practice squad. He's been here all summer, all spring. I'm like, why is he here? We've seen nothing from this guy. What is he doing here? Well, they finally said, you're right. I don't know why he's here. And he sustained an ankle injury and made it easier for them to just say, all right, we're moving on. And they cut him, right? Allen George played in the game. He had an egregious coverage break before the half that should have been pass interference. Then had the audacity to tell the fans that they were crying, right? He's doing this shit. And I'm like, are you serious, bro? That was clearly pass interference, and the official left the flag in his pocket. And you got the audacity to be taunting somebody talking about stop crying, right? Bro, you should have set them up for a field goal right before the half with your chicanery and your shenanigans. They was like, all right, yeah, he's ass. So they cut him. And then Dominique Hampton, which is the big whoa. They released linebacker Dominique Hampton. Also, they placed tackle Lucas Niang, who literally just got here a week and a half ago, who tore his ACL. We found that news out yesterday. He tore his ACL. His season is done. And Kayvon Seymour injured himself in the game. I don't know the severity of it, but clearly he injured himself enough to the point where they could put him on the injured reserve list. He's on IR. His season is done. So both of these guys will be back on the roster next year. The Commanders still hold the rights to both of these players, but they are done for the 2025 season. So in all totality, they freed up 5 roster spots, filled 3 of them. There are 2 roster spots still unspoken for. So they could not be done here. We'll see if they decide to sign some more guys or what they decide to do. But placing 2 guys on IR and cutting another 3, you freed up 5 roster spots. You then used up 3 of those roster spots. For those of you doing the heavy hitting math at home, 5 minus 3 is 2. There's 2 roster spots remaining. So they may not be done when it's all said and done. There may still be, which is why they worked out offensive linemen yesterday, because they knew Lucas Niang was, done for the season. They did not sign an offensive lineman. So my guess is one of those spots will go to an offensive lineman, because you got to fill a team, right? On in the preseason game 3 against the Ravens. You're not playing anybody that is worth a damn in that game. So you got to have enough offensive linemen to be able to go out and field a team. So I assume that one of those spots will be used on a tackle, and the other will be used on a defensive end, right? They tried out some defensive ends, weren't blown away by any of them. I assume they'll try out some more, and we'll get a new defensive end in here, and we'll get a new tackle in here, because as you can see, they've already replaced the 2 corners in Kayvon Seymour and Allen George with 2 corners, and they've already replaced the linebacker with a linebacker. So my guess is they're going to replace Lucas Niang with another tackle, and they're going to replace Vladimir Fiocco Jr. with another defensive end. But that is yet to be seen. So 2 roster spots remain. But let's go back and talk about Dominique Hampton's release now, as that is the biggest news of the day so far. Former 6th-round pick of the 2024 inaugural draft class of Adam Peters here in Washington. That's sort of a stunner. Now, for some of you who thought this was possible, and Rio was at the forefront of that, we literally had a discussion, I think it was last week, where I was like, they're not cutting none of the draft picks from last year or this year. And Rio was like, I don't know, man. Dom Hampton ain't done shit since he got here. And I was like, we're going to see. I just think they're going to give him more time. Bullshit. And I actually love, like, and this is going to sound crazy, but I love that they're standing their ground with Terry from this standpoint. I hate that they're standing their ground with Terry. but I love it at the same time. I hate it because it's affecting our team, whether they want to admit it or not. It's affecting practice. It's affecting chemistry. It's affecting time on task. It's affecting every aspect of this team, mentally, physically. It's a problem. Terry should be out there. We shouldn't be having these same conversations about the receiver position. We wouldn't be having these conversations if Terry were out there about the wide receiver position. We might be talking about, is anybody going to step up on the back end of but we wouldn't give a shit. If Terry and Debo were out there doing work and you were trying to work with these guys like Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane, as ancillary parts that, will contribute this season. And, at some point, Noah Brown will be back. We wouldn't be talking about this. We wouldn't be having wide receiver conversations. We'd be like, hey, is anybody going to stand up and try to be the sixth receiver, or are they just going to keep 5? I'm at the point right now where I'm like, just keep 5 unless Ja'Cory Brooks says, nah, I'm good, man. Y'all need to go ahead and keep me and stop playing. Like I said, I thought that Michael Gallup looked solid, and I think he's going to get more opportunities. And if he continues to make plays and catches, he could still be that 6th receiver. But right now, if it's not Ja'Cory Brooks for me right now, I don't need a 6th receiver. Just keep 5. Put a couple of guys on the practice squad in case of an emergency and keep it pushing. But right now, we don't need 6 guys right now. Based off of what we've been shown, we don't need 6. But I love that they've stood their ground with Terry. Just from this standpoint, is that we're not going to just do things for the sake of doing things. Like, so many people like, just give Terry his money. And they're like, nah, bro, that's not how business works. That's not how we do things around here. We're not just doing things for the sake of doing things. I like that. On one hand, I like it because it shows that they're not going to just be handing out contracts willy-nilly. Clearly, we saw that with how they handled Jeremy Chin. I mean, Jeremy Chin and to a lesser degree, Dante Fowler Jr., they were squabbling over a couple of mil with those 2 dudes. It ain't like Jeremy Chin went out here and got a 3-year, $27 million deal. Jeremy Chin signed a 2-year, $16 million deal. 10 of it fully guaranteed. Like, they could have done that if they wanted him. They just had a price. It was like, we think you're worth $5 million. I'm just throwing out a random number. We think you're worth $5 million a year. We'll sign you to a 2-year, $10 million deal with 7 of it guaranteed. But we're not giving you $8 million a year. Right? And Jeremy Chin was like, really, bro? Seriously? That's it? All right, I got to bounce. They looked at Dante Fowler Jr. Dante Fowler Jr. didn't get this massive deal from the Cowboys. I don't even know what his deal was with Dallas. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot. But they said, this is how much we value. What you did last year was great, but you ain't doing that shit again. And you still have deficiencies in your game, and you want us to pay you like someone who is about that life, like you finna go get double-digit sacks again. You hadn't had double-digit sacks prior to last year for the last 7-8 seasons. We supposed to just assume you're going to do that again? And he's like, yeah, you should assume I'm going to do it again. And they're like, nah. We got a number. If you ain't trying to come in at that number, then you got to bounce. So he did. I like that they stand for something. If you don't stand for something, you fall for anything. I hate that Terry hasn't been signed. I hate that they're not showing that man the respect that he deserves. But I'm also like, hey, don't just give him money just because he's Terry McLaurin, right? I like that too. But I still think they should have already gotten this done, right? And I'm hoping that it gets done. I'm not sure anymore. Like before, I was like, oh yeah, it'll get done. Oh yeah, I'm not sure anymore that this shit gets done. I'm not. Like, our front office they not playing, okay? For those of you who think this shit is a game, they not playing out here. Today is further proof of that. Dom Hampton is a guy that they drafted. They asked him to make a positional switch, and they wanted to see something from him, and they haven't seen jack diddly poo squat from this man, and they cut him. We still got 2 preseason games, 1 week of joint practices, and a bunch more, practices as a team collectively together. And they said, nah, we've seen enough. This reminds me of Jamin Davis. They came in last year. They asked Jamin Davis to make a positional switch. They wanted to see something from Jamin Davis. They initially let him on the team. And then very quickly they said, this ain't going to work. And they cut him. I like the fact that they can admit when a mistake was made, say, hey, this ain't working, and move forward. We're not going to double down on the mistake we made. You're not going to get every draft pick right. So again, I know they like Javonte John Baptiste, but he needs to get healthy. Again, I'm going to be honest. I didn't see anything in the game. You know, I'm a big Jalen Holmes fan. He didn't pop. I saw flashes from Eddie Goldman. There was one play where he tried to jump. He literally jumped the center, got in the backfield, but they just ran to the gap, the next gap over. He jumped the other A gap. The running back ran to the other A gap. But if somebody was there, Eddie would have helped blow that whole thing up. I saw flashes from Eddie. I saw nothing from Jalen Holmes in the game. But that doesn't mean Jalen Holmes can't contribute. We watched him play last year, and we watched him be impactful last year in real meaningful games, by the way. So it's going to be interesting. This changes everything. The fact that they cut their first player from either one of their two draft classes is important. It's, to me, a turning point in how we need to start viewing the decisions that are going to be made here. Because until they cut someone, it felt sacred. Like, okay, they're not cutting anybody from their draft classes. Sort of like what we've said about how they go about drafting players with character concerns and, you know, some potential off-field issues, red flags, if you will. Until they actually draft a player with some of those concerns and red flags, that doesn't exist here in Washington. Those guys don't get commander tags, right? So, and they still haven't drafted a guy like that yet. And until they can talk and give us all the lip service they want, Adam Peters literally told us, hey, we had a guy in San Francisco that everyone told us was a bad guy. This, that, the 30 ended up being one of the best guys in the locker room. That's a great story. But until you actually pull the trigger on someone like that here, that's all it is a story. Because we don't believe you. You need more people. That's how I feel about that. And that's how I felt about draft picks getting cut here in the first 2 years. Now, next year, that first draft class, to me, they were going to be a part of the discussion, and they were going to be fair game. But I thought they were safe for one more year. I was wrong. They are not. And that means guys like Jordan McGee is not getting cut. They see too much promise in him. They see, you know, too much upside with him. I think they still view him as a Dre Greenlaw type guy here. 5th round pick, guy that can turn into one of the best linebackers in the league. We just got to get this guy healthy. He's not going anywhere. Healthy or not healthy, he's not going anywhere. Javonte John Baptiste doesn't feel like he's going anywhere either. I think they see promise from that, you know, lengthy defensive end that they drafted out of the 7th round, in the 7th round out of Notre Dame last year. I think they see promise in him. He needs to get healthy, though. Because, honestly, with Dom Hampton getting cut, there's no guarantee that Duke Riley's making this roster. We'll see what he looks like. But that makes it a lot easier if we start crunching the numbers from a roster standpoint. It makes it a lot easier to get this roster to 53 if there's no Dom Hampton on the roster. Because now you're not keeping 6 linebackers. You're only keeping 5. It makes the numbers so much easier to condense and make fit into the box that we needed to fit in. Now, if Duke Riley's replacing him and he's making his roster, then, you know, things get interesting again. But as of right now, I think the roster, like, this doesn't change anything. Like, it's not like we were relying on, you know, Dominique Hampton. It's just a shocker because I had been adamant that they're not cutting any of their draft picks. This changes everything. Now, somebody DM'd me and said, they just cut Dom Hampton. Who's next? Is it Luke McCaffrey? And I'm like, you're going too far now. It's a massive difference between cutting a late day 3 pick and a day 2 guy. Okay. There's a massive difference between the two. Now, we've seen them gut former first round picks like they were nothing. We've seen them slash former second round picks like they're yesterday's trash. Keep in mind, they cut Emmanuel Forbes in his second year as a former first round pick. They cut Jamin Davis as a former first round pick. They cut Fedarian Mathis as a former second round pick. They don't give a shit. That's what it looks like. These guys throw, caution to the wind. They move with reckless abandon. We love it. Well, those weren't their guys. It's a lot easier to cut a guy that you didn't draft, that you didn't see potential in, that you didn't stick your neck out for and put your reputation on the line to select. It's much easier to cut a former first round pick when you didn't make the selection. You get here, you inherit somebody else's doing. You quickly realize this guy doesn't fit what we feel like is a good representation of what a commander is. They don't meet the commander standard. Let's get them out of here, right? Jahan Dotson, another first round pick that they moved on from expeditiously as they got here to clean up this roster, right? They're not getting rid of a third round pick from last year that they drafted. It's much different to move on from someone else's first round pick. They're not cutting their third round pick from a season ago. As many of those Luke McCaffrey haters that exist out there, they're not getting rid of Luke McCaffrey. But I'm going to tell you that this changes everything. This right here, this little shakeup, and it was a minor one. It's Dominique Hampton, bro. If there was anybody that was getting cut out of the last 2 draft classes, it'd be him. He didn't look at every other draft pick that they had last year. The other 8 contributed in some way, shape, or form last year, in some form or fashion. The other 8 got on the field either offensively or defensively, on special teams at least. Like Dom Hampton got on special teams a little bit last year, but not much. Like I think he might have had 1 game where he actually was active, and that was it. He really didn't contribute to what they were doing. They redshirted him for all intents and purposes, and they needed to see a return on their investment this year, and they just didn't feel like they were getting that. So of the 9 guys that were drafted last year, he was the one that you looked at and said, hey, man, if they're going to do something, because they're not cutting any of the 6 guys that they drafted in the first 2 days of the draft last year. Right? They had 6 picks in the first 2 days last year. They're not cutting any of those guys. And they only had 2 guys that they selected the final, day of the draft last year. And one of those guys, or 3 guys, excuse me. So they had 5. No, they had 6, and then they had 3 in day 3 last year. And the other 2 actually, played on defense, and they see them as guys that can contribute moving forward in Javonte Jean-Baptiste and Jordan McGee. The one guy that didn't contribute at all last year was Dom Hampton. So of all the guys, he was the weakest link. You're only as strong as your weakest link. So I get it. I just didn't see it coming. I'm not going to sit here and act like I did, because I didn't. But we move forward. But now, pop, pop, shots fired. Loud and clear. We all heard it. We all saw it. We all heard it. We all saw it. So we know it exists. If you weren't one of the first 6 dudes drafted in 2024, you're not safe. Even though they're not cutting Jordan McGee. I'm looking at Javonte Jean-Baptiste and I'm saying, hey, you better get healthy, bro. They might not just totally outright get rid of you. Like, you could be back on the practice squad, but you could not be on this roster, though. You don't have to be a part of the 53. Like, they done with Dom Hampton. They done with him. Finito, finished. He's not back on the practice squad. He's done here in Washington. Javonte, I can see them cutting him and then getting him back on the practice squad and continuing to work with him that way. Now, again, you got him under contract for 4 years. Do you want to break that up? No. If you have a choice, the answer is no. So, is there anybody next? No, I don't think so. But then again, I didn't think Dom Hampton was coming up. So there's that. But if I had to say somebody needed to watch their back, I'd tell you it's Javonte Jean-Baptiste. But I don't see him getting jumped. So anyhow, I digress. I just wanted to throw that out there. That was really intriguing stuff that they cut Dom Hampton after a poor performance in the preseason. But that poor performance in the preseason was the last straw for them. He hadn't been producing in camp. They hadn't seen enough from him all of August and some of July, and in the spring. They weren't blown away by his transformation. They hadn't seen enough from him. And I'll be honest with you, I told you guys on Friday night, I didn't see anything from him in the game, which was a little bit disheartening. But I also said it, but I'm not there every day. And that's a big thing. That's a big part of this. But I also said, hey, it's his first game at linebacker, this year. Making excuses for him because he played linebacker last year in the preseason. But I was like, hey, it's his first game, give him an opportunity. It was like, nah, we've seen enough, bro. Okay. All right. Selfishly, like I hate it for Dom Hampton, but selfishly, I kind of like that shit. Like, hey, you ain't getting it done. Ain't no spot here for you, man. And we ain't going to wait. We ain't going to procrastinate. We going to get it done, and we going to get somebody else in here that we think can get done what we need to get done. So I kind of like it. I like it a lot, but that's just me. So practice yesterday. And let me just say this too, because I'm hearing a lot of this right now as it pertains to Jordan McGee. I know you guys are frustrated he hasn't been able to stay healthy. Yes, it is frustrating that he hasn't been out on the field in two summers. In 2 summers, a total of 4 preseason games he could have played in. We've seen that man in 1 preseason game. I know it's frustrating. I know. I get it. And in the 1 preseason game we saw him in, he played 1 possession and he got hurt. I get it. It's frustrating. You got to give him a chance to get whatever's going on situated. Let's just see how it plays out. He may be one of these dudes that's made of glass and can't stay healthy. He may be one of those dudes, and it's unfortunate. Some guys, their body betrays them once they get to the highest level. It's just unfair, but that's how life goes sometimes for certain guys. He could be one of those guys. I'm not putting that on him. I know it's frustrating, but y'all got to understand that this dude is super talented, and you just got to wait. Some guys get more opportunities based off of their talent, and he is one of them. He can change this defense. Y'all just got to be patient with him. Trust me on this one. I know the talent when I see it, and I know y'all do too. If y'all seen it, if y'all watch this tape at Temple, if y'all watch some of the action, when he's out there, it looks different. The second Eagles game, the New Orleans Saints game, you watch him out there and you see it looks different. I don't think he was out there for the Saints game. It's a different game. I can't think of the other game I'm thinking about. I don't think he was out there for the Saints game. But it looks different. I'll just say that. Y'all just got to give him a shot. I know it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating. Anyhow, let's get to practice yesterday. So yesterday was a light practice, as today will be. DQ probably at the podium right now as we speak. He was supposed to hit the podium at around 2 o'clock. Practice today is taking place around 2. So he was supposed to hit the podium prior to practice. So he might have jumped up at the podium at like 1:45, something like that. Practice was supposed to pop off at 2 o'clock today. It's supposed to be another light practice like yesterday's was. And then tomorrow's practice is supposed to be the padded practice. Then they got an off day Wednesday. And then we start talking about the preseason tilt against Cincinnati on Thursday. So yesterday was more red zone work. There was an emphasis placed on the standard. Like Albeit a light practice, they went hard, as you could imagine, coming off of the debacle that was Friday's preseason game. Yesterday's practice was one of those re-emphasizing that the standard is the standard type of practices, despite them not having pads on. It was probably in their best interest not to have pads on anyway, because it would have been a really hard practice based off of what they put out on the field on Friday. But obviously, 48 hours removed from a game, less than 48 hours removed from a game, you're not going to have pads on. So a lot of red zone work. The struggles in the red zone continue. We saw that, or we heard about that rather, in the joint practice, that there were struggles. We know that they struggled in the red zone a little bit in the joint practice against the Patriots. There's no Terry McLaurin or Noah Brown. You can't just force feed the football to Zach Ertz every time. So, and Debo, right? But another Debo Samuel, another day, another practice, another Debo Samuel, deep touchdown from Jaden Daniels, this time on a wheel route up the sideline between two defenders, the same two that it always seems like it is, Mikey Sainristil and Quan Martin. But Jaden and Debo's connection continues to strengthen in the absence of Terry. I've said one of the unintended consequences of Terry not being in camp is Debo's connection with Jaden continuing to strengthen. So if there's one silver lining in Terry not being out there, with Noah not being out there, is that Debo continues to be the number one guy. It's the only guy he can rely on at the receiver position, which is not good. But it has strengthened their bond, because that's a guy we're going to be relying on come September and into the season. So I'd rather him be throwing the ball to him a bunch than guys that aren't going to be here past, August 29th or whatever, right? August 27th, when they cut this roster down to 53. I'd rather him be throwing to guys that are going to be here, like Jalen Lane and Luke McCaffrey, than to a bunch of guys that aren't going to be here, like Chris Moore and KJ Osborne and guys like that. But it is what it is at the end of the day. There are a lot of footballs that hit the ground on Sunday in red zone. They struggled to the point where Jaden Daniels, who will talk about what he had to say at the press conference, was asked about the red zone and the struggles at the joint practice and at practice yesterday, and how does he feel about the red zone offense. We'll talk about his answer a little bit later on, but it's an issue, and it's so noticeable now, and everyone's talking about it. People are writing articles about it. We've talked about it. They know it exists, and at some point, they're going to have to do something or not. I mean, again, Terry's under contract, so technically speaking, they don't have to do anything. But I feel like if you don't get something done with Terry and he plays on the last year of his deal, that you've now gone into territory where there's no return. You're at the point of no return. Like, you can still salvage the situation right now. If Terry's forced to play on the last year of his deal, you're at the point of no return. If I'm Terry McLaurin, I really don't want to be here now. Clearly, you don't value me, and the ship has sailed. I still think, because I expect Terry to have a big year, even though a lot of times when seasons happen like this, off seasons rather, it doesn't usually bode well for a good year. Statistically, health-wise, all that stuff is usually compromised. If Terry goes out, has another big year, I imagine they're going to franchise tag him. That's been my whole thought process, is this is going to result in a franchise tag next year anyway. And at that point, you're definitely not getting a long-term deal, which that's the whole goal for Terry McLaurin. You're not getting a brand new deal, at 32 years old. If you ball out again after, like, you're in the Trey Hendricks territory at that point, whereas, like, if he doesn't get a deal from Cincinnati going into this season, Trey Henderson isn't going to get the deal that he's looking for. There's almost zero chance he goes out and has 17 and a half sacks again, which is what he's had the last 2 years. It's not zero. He can do it again. I highly doubt that he does it again. But even if the number's 13 and a half, that's still really good, but that shows a decline. Like, 17 is such a crazy number. to do that 2 years in a row, and then even if he has 15, they could say, well, he's on the decline. Really, he's not. That's 15 sacks. What are we talking about? But anything that people can use to not pay you what you are worth, they're going to use it. And, you know, it's an unfortunate situation that Hendrickson finds himself in and Terry finds himself in. But they need to get that situation resolved. Like, we keep having the same conversations. These are getting old, but this receiver group is struggling. We don't have enough talent at the receiver position. You can't count on Noah Brown. Like, I don't know about you, but them telling me, oh yeah, we're ramping up Noah Brown, we don't want to miss. That's cool. And y'all are doing the right thing, and you're definitely taking it slow with Noah. But Noah Brown hasn't stayed healthy not one season in his NFL career, not a single one. Why am I to believe that this year is going to be any different when he's already starting off the season injured? Why is this season going to be any different? So all you're telling me is that if Terry stays healthy, you got two receivers. That's it right now. If you can't count on Luke McCaffrey, if you can't count on Jalen Lane, you're telling me that we basically got two receivers. And if anything happens to either one of those guys, we're screwed. It's not good enough. It's not good enough. Either you believe in some of these guys on the back end of the roster who ain't done jack shit thus far, or you need to go out and get somebody. Like somebody asked me the other day, would you go get an Amari Cooper? Why not? Why not go sign an Amari Cooper? Like, I get what he is. And again, if Amari is coming here, you got to let him know, bro. Like, you could be starting opposite of Terry, but we really like Noah Brown. And if he's healthy, you're nothing more than depth here. Is Amari Cooper going to really sign somewhere to just be depth? Probably not, which is what you got to take into consideration. But I'm open to all avenues being explored at this point because I talked about the depth of this team being better, and it is. But the one place it's not better right now, as it stands, is receiver. As crazy as it is to say this, last year we were better depth-wise last year with Jamison Crowder and Olamide Zaccheaus than we are this year. That's crazy because we didn't love our receiver group last year. Okay, not we. I didn't love our wide receiver group last year. I didn't love it. Between De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Jamison Crowder, I was like, this is an uninspiring group. I like Olamide, though. I'm still shocked that they didn't bring him back. And by the looks of it, it may have been a mistake. We'll see. We'll see. I was a huge Olamide Zaccheaus fan, and I thought that DQ was, and I was shocked. And I asked Candy Waller, who was she surprised that they didn't bring back? And her, without hesitation, she said Olamide Zaccheaus. I was shocked too. A lot of people were going to go Dante Fowler Jr. or Jeremy Chin. No, those guys could have easily not been back. Olamide Zaccheaus was the one where I went, whoa, that was a bit shocking. But I also understood it. We can do better. And I was like, yeah, we can. And we should strive for better. This ain't better right now. And again, maybe if you had Terry and Noah out there, we wouldn't even be having this conversation and we'd feel a lot differently. If you got those three and then you got Luke McCaffrey and Jalen Lane, you feel a lot different about that wide receiver room. You're like, at this point, if you had those guys, you literally are just talking about one spot at the back end of the roster. Like, who gives a shit if who the sixth receiver is? I don't care. That guy shouldn't be playing very much. And if he is, we've got a problem on our hands. Anyway, we're probably in trouble anyhow. But that's not the conversation we're having because Terry McLaurin's not out there, because Noah Brown continues to be injured and nursing an injury and trying to get his way back onto the field. And so it is just Deebo Samuel. And now you do have this void at receiver and you're looking for guys that just don't seem capable of filling it. You're asking them to do something that they're probably not capable of doing, which is filling a void that is clearly exists on this roster right now. And as I've said, the Terry situation is frustrating because it's affecting this team in various ways. It's affecting this team in various ways. Not just practice, It's affecting them in games, clearly. It's affecting the chemistry that those two have. It's affecting the guys around him. Like Terry and Debo need reps on how to run routes in sequence with each other. Like you're taking reps away from them being able to get on the field. Okay, I know Terry's going to run his route at this depth. I need to run my route at this depth so that we can be in sync with each other. Like there's so many different things. The timing, the rhythm, all that stuff is being displaced right now because there's no Terry McLaurin. And again, there's a mental, our quarterback just had to answer multiple questions about the wide receiver room, about red zone. Why? Because Terry McLaurin's not out there. Or else the shit wouldn't look like that and he wouldn't have to answer those type of questions. It's a problem. Whether they want to admit it or not, it's a problem. And so it was a problem again at practice today, or yesterday, rather, with the red zone. Continues to be an issue. Now, you know, Jaden talked about it, and I'll tell you what he said, and it was a good answer. Good answer. Good answer. Good answer. But the fact remains that that's an issue. But it's good to see Debo and JD5 hooking up on another touchdown in training camp. That's been one of the staples of training camp to this point, and it continues to be as we move forward. So let's get to what was said at the press conference yesterday. And we may be back later on this evening. DQ spoke, you know, before practice. There was practice today. And then we're going to get two rookies, Jalen Lane and Kane Madrano, after practice today. Actually really interested to see how they felt about their first action as an NFL pro in the preseason game Friday night versus the Patriots, among other topics that they'll clearly have to answer. But I can't wait to see how they felt about their first action. So we may come back later on this evening and discuss the practice today, or we might just wait until tomorrow and combine the two. We'll see if it is, you know, noteworthy enough to do. But DQ yesterday talked about the depth of the roster and the opportunities that exist. And he was asked about the roster depth after, because I've said this already. Here's what the preseason represents for me. The preseason isn't about your frontline starters. It is if you're going to put them out there. A lot of teams just bypass the entire preseason altogether because they get joint practice work. The Rams are notorious for that. They don't play their starters at all, one iota in the preseason. They get joint practice work, and that's how they get their work in for their starters. And there are other teams around the league that do that as well. But to me, preseason is all about your depth. Those are the guys that are going to play. You're not going to see the start. Even if the starters play, Patrick Mahomes played in a game on Saturday against the Cardinals, and he threw one pass. It was a touchdown pass, and it was 1 yard, but it's one pass, right? He threw one pass. Like, that's the kind of work guys are getting in the preseason. It's not a lot. You know, you're not going to put your guys out there for a ton. You get one possession, you might throw 2 or 3 passes max, you're out of there, right? It's about your depth. That's what the preseason is all about. How do the young guys look? How are some of these veterans that we may be relying on? How do they play? You know, the depth of your roster is tested in the preseason. We'll find out how good your depth is because your depth is playing against the depth around the league in the preseason. And what the game on Friday said to me is we got a long way to go from a depth standpoint. A long way to go, which we already knew. I think it was a wake-up call for some, though, that thought that this roster was a top half of the league roster, because I told y'all as a whole, this is not a top half of the league roster. It's not a bottom, it's not a bottom fourth. It's not like the 8th worst roster in the league or anything like that. It's not the 24th roster, but I think it's the 20th or the 21st or the 19th roster, the best roster in the league. Like, it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Again, 5 elevates you. You take 5 out of the mix, and we have a bottom 4th, a bottom quartile roster in this league. You take 5 out of the mix. Nobody's checking for us. We didn't go to the NFC Championship game. We're like the Giants going into this season if we don't have 5. But we do have 5. So that changes everything. But I had a couple people after Friday's game say, yo, I was really overrating the depth of this roster. That was a wake-up call. And that's what I said after Friday's game is that was a wake-up call to those of you who thought that this team, from a roster standpoint, was ready. You know, from 1 to 53 was ready to compete with the likes of the Ravens and the Eagles. No. We are ready to compete with those teams from 1 to about 27. Okay. We're ready to compete with those teams from about 1 to 27. The 11 on offense, the 11 on defense, and about 5 of our special teams guys whoop ass. And they're ready to compete. And there's a couple of guys from a depth standpoint that you really feel good about. Like extend that number out to 30, possibly. But from 1 to 53, nah, we're not ready. From 1 to say 30, yeah, we can compete with just about anybody in the league again because we got 5. When healthy, obviously. But the NFL is a war of attrition. You're going to have injuries. You're going to have guys step up in depth roles. And right now, that's the question. And so the depth of this roster was tested, and DQ pretty much spoke about that. Yeah, you know, guys got to play better. You know, the standard is the standard. It doesn't matter who's out there. And he said, look, it's an opportunity. No, Terry, that means somebody's getting an opportunity. And he keeps talking about the same thing. Why? Because dudes ain't stepping up. Dudes ain't stepping up. So instead of him saying, you know what? Terry hasn't been out there, and Chris Moore is really taking advantage of that opportunity. He ain't able to say that because Chris Moore ain't taking advantage of that opportunity, as we saw on Friday night with the 2 drops. He would love to say, you know what? KJ Osborne has really stepped up, you know, and taking advantage of the opportunity. But he had a drop for a touchdown on Friday night. I know he would love to say, you know what? Michael Gallup has really come in, and after not playing football for a year, has really looked good. He's looked sharp. He's picked up right where he left off. But he slipped on a coming out of a break that led to a pick. Probably would have been a pick anyway. At least he would have been able to fight for it some. You can't say anybody stepped up because they really haven't. So then he was asked, what are some positions of strength right now? It ain't a lot of them. You know, based off of what we've seen right now, there ain't a bunch of them, but we already knew that. I told you that our starting linebackers are a strength. The athleticism at the position is a strength, but the overall position is not a strength because we don't know what you're getting out of Kane Medrano. We don't know what we're getting out of Jordan McGee. We got to get him healthy first. And clearly Dom Hampton wasn't giving them what they were looking for. So there's a lot that the linebacker position leaves to be desired, right? So he named safety, which we said was a question mark going in. But I'm going to tell you right now, there wasn't anybody that had a more impressive performance on Friday night than Jeremy Reeves. Revo was flying around, bro. Revo was flying around, hitting anything that moved. I know they love that. They love to see that. So he said safety. They feel good about that position. I told you corner is one of our best positions on the roster. And after Friday's performance, I would concur with that. Because the depth of and we didn't even see Jonathan Jones on Friday for whatever reason. I guess a veteran. What am I saying? He's a veteran. He's 9 years in. They didn't need to see him. They know what he's about. And gave him a vet rest, game. But Noah Igbenogany was outstanding. Trey Amos was outstanding. Okay. If we need depth to be pushed into the game, I feel confident that guys are going to step in there and play well. So he said cornerback and he said running back. You know why I said running back? Because he already knows what he's got in Brian Robinson Jr., whether you like it or not. And he knows what he's got in Austin Eckler. And he loved what he saw in Bill. And I thought Jeremy McNichols said, hey, don't forget about me. Don't forget about me, bruh. And I said, I haven't. I just don't know if it's space for you. And he said, well, make space. I heard him loud and clear. Make space. I said, okay. I'll talk to the fellas and see what they say. They're keeping 4 running backs. I think they're going to keep 4 running backs. You tell me that that's one of the positions of strength. I don't see you cutting one of them. And I've already said, if it ain't 6 receivers to keep, why cut a position of strength to add some weakness, more weakness to the roster? That doesn't make any sense to me. I can't speak for you. I'd rather keep 4 running backs than 6 receivers at this point. If it came down to making a decision between the two, give me 4 running backs, not 6 receivers. Right now, you don't even have to make that decision because you just cut one of the linebackers that was supposed to make the roster. So you might have trimmed off some fat, but Duke Riley could come in here, impress them enough over the next, month, or let's call it 3 weeks. And he may be able to make enough of an impact that he makes this roster. I doubt that, but I won't throw it out. They didn't just bring him in here just to be a camp body. They're looking for some veterans on that next wave of linebackers. They don't have any. So they're looking for one. Maybe Duke Riley provides that for them. We'll see. He talked about the coverage, the kick coverage breakdowns, and boy, was he pissed. You can tell he was not happy about the breakdowns on kick coverage at all, because he said, this is a hallmark of who we are. Like I've talked to y'all about the importance that they place on special teams. They've proven that with their actions. They didn't just talk about how important special teams is to them. They went out and gave extensions to their 3 best special teams players in Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, and Nick Bellore. Like, they're not playing here. They're serious about this. Tyler Owens and Colson Yankoff being kept on the roster last year was indicative of how important they felt like those 2 were on special teams. They don't bullshit when they talk about special teams. That's important to them. That's a way of life around here. That's how they get down. And so I told you there was nothing more shocking to me in the Friday preseason game than the lack of kick ass on special teams. Because, look, Matt Gay missing, okay. The other 10 guys could do their job right, and Matt Gay commits the kick. That could happen. You dismiss that. We don't get gashed like that on special teams. Everybody wants to bring up the Kevontae Turpin kick return last year. He had to be special on that play. First of all, anytime the ball hits the ground and bounces the way that it did that time, it messes everything up, right? Guys get displaced and out of position, but we were still there to make a tackle. This man hit the circle button and spun on Jeremy Reeves when he had a chance to tackle him down inside the 15-yard line, and then he just took off. That's special. Like, most dudes in the league ain't doing that. He had to be special, and he was, because he is. We don't give up kick returns like that. We gave up a 100-yard kickoff return on the first play, and the man was untouched. We gave up another one that was like 70-plus yards to Antonio. We don't do these type of things. He was livid. He was livid. I bet they spent about a good 30 minutes just on those coverage breakdowns. So he was asked, are they bringing in? So he told the media that they were going to bring in some guys to try out after practice today. So that prompted a question of, hey, y'all bringing in some competition for Matt Gay? And he was like, that's a fair question. I understand where y'all coming from, but he's like, we ain't there yet, man. I mean, look, I told y'all, they gave this man the most guaranteed money for a 1-year contract in NFL history for a place kicker. They want this to work very badly. But as we've seen with them, they're not tied to this contract. If he's not getting done, they will cut him and find another kicker. He's supposed to solve their kicking woes from a season ago. I talked about this on Bleacher Report. I don't think it's time to bring in competition for Matt Gay. I don't. He missed a kick. You hate it. He made some kicks yesterday at practice. He made 2 of them from 50 plus yesterday. He did miss 1 kick, and surprisingly, the kick that he missed at practice yesterday was from like 38 yards or something like that, which is like, bro, what are you doing? What are we doing here, guy? But he hit all of the 50, the 40, and the 50 at 250-plus yard field goals. He hit them both yesterday at practice. I think he's fine. But it is a situation worth monitoring. All of a sudden now, place kicker's back on the radar. All we wanted was for him to just go out and be clean and just put us at ease, right? Just make us feel comfortable about the place kicking situation. Just don't make this another thing that we got to add to the list of shit that we got to monitor. Well, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. He can make all the rest of his kicks. They're going to still be fans that still remember him missing a 49-yarder in the first preseason game, the first time they saw him in a Commander's uniform. And that's tough because, again, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So hopefully he got that out of his system and he's lights out from here on out. I don't think there needs to be a competition right now, but when you watch other kickers like Cam Little of the Jaguars, bang a 70-yard kick home, and we're playing against the Patriots, and the serial killer, who's not even their real place kicker, by the way. They drafted Andres Bergales to be their place kicker. You see the serial kicker, John Parker Romo, banging it home from like 58. You're like, what's going on here, man? What's up with our situation? So he said, nah, we're not there yet. But Matt Gay needs to tighten up. The construction of the 53-man roster, DQ actually got into his, the thought process of that. He says he actually, like a fan, goes home and sits down and jots a 53-man roster. Like, he's like, it's fun. Like, it's something that he does just so he stays like in the moment as to where he is. And he likes to see the gradual growth of some guys in his mind. So he'll make a 53 before camp. Then we get to camp, and when the first 53 comes out, he'll make another one, and he's like, yeah, all right, this guy's really, grown since the last time. This guy's kind of taking a step back. And so it gives him a framework of which to work with when you get to that final one. So he's like, it doesn't really impact anything. And he says, I try to throw biases out of the way. I try to be as objective as possible, give everybody an opportunity. But he said it is a fun exercise. It is something that he does to kind of stay engaged with the roster and kind of seeing where guys are and how he feels about them on this date versus how he feels about, this guy maybe 2-3 weeks later, right? So, because coaches love guys that get better, guys that take to coaching. That's a big thing. You would love everyone to step in there and hit the ground running and be awesome the very first time, but that's not how it works. You want to see guys that take to coaching, that are able to get better based off of, hey, this is how you did it the first time. This is how we want you to do it. And then you don't got to tell him that no more. He's got it, and he's moved on to the next thing. Coaches love that. They call it being coachable, right? He talked about Jalen Lane, the punt returner. We really didn't get to see him do much. He only returned 2 punts in the game. That's because our defense failed to get stops and forced the Patriots to punt the football. And then they had so many short fields that they were never really in a position to have to punt in the first place, whether it was a turnover, a big kick return, etc. It just seemed like they always had, the ball in great field position. And then when they did have to drive the length of the field, they did against the defense on Friday. So it wasn't a lot of punts that took place. He had 2 opportunities. He fielded them. That was nice. He talked about how he, circled the ball, approached it the right way. They're excited about him back there, but he really didn't get a lot of opportunities. He talked about this team looking different than they did on Friday. Of course, they're going to look different. This is not something that's going to continue to transpire, right? Like the standard is the standard, and they didn't uphold the standard. He was pissed after the game on Friday, as you could imagine. We haven't really talked about what he said, but he was pissed. He was pissed, and he should have been, right? Like, that's not good enough. He said, when we play like that and we don't play up to our standards, it really burns my ass. I got a kick out of that because I wouldn't say some shit like that, but I would say some crazy shit. And y'all would fry me up for it. But anyway, he said they're going to look a lot different than they did on Friday, which we know. That's not who we are. And the starters will be out there on Monday, so that's not a thing. But that was a good. I honestly think that Patriots game was a good thing for this team because it's going to force guys to have to level up or you won't be here. You know, sometimes you get caught up in the hype and, you know, a lot of those guys weren't even here last year. So they can't get caught up in the hype of last season. But I think that was needed for some of the guys that were here last year. That, hey, you need to turn it up a notch. And then I think it was good for some of the fan base that thought a little bit higher of this roster than they probably should have as a whole. Again, I'll put our first 30 up against anybody in the league because of 5. But as we saw in the NFC Championship game, we started to have to rely on depth, right? And when you start asking those guys 31 through 53 to step up, which is what we were doing, when there's no Cosme, when there's no Deron Payne, and you're asking Carl Davis, and you're asking other guys on the offensive line to step in, and you got all these injuries, and now all of a sudden Eckler can't return kickoffs, so you're asking Jeremy McNichols to go back. You start to see where you get tested, and that we're not built for that yet. We're not there yet. You know what I'm saying? We're not there yet. When you starting to have to rely on Michael Davis or Benjamin St. Juste, we ain't there. We weren't there last year. We're there now, cornerback wise. We weren't there last year. So when you say, hey, I got to put these guys in the game, you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. So it's going to be interesting this year to see if they've made enough adjustments so if we're on that fringe level where you maybe can get to that 33rd guy on the roster, is it good enough to still keep the quality of play where it needs to be, or do we fall off of a cliff? We'll see. But he talked about Tell the Truth Mondays. You know, that's the thing. When you don't play well, we hear about Tell the Truth Mondays a ton. And it's Tell the Truth whatever day. That was a Tell the Truth Saturday. It could be a Tell the Truth Monday. It could be a Tell the Truth Friday. It could be a Tell the Truth Monday, Thursday. Because we play on a Wednesday, I think this year. It might be a Thursday on Christmas, whatever day Christmas is this year. We all over the map. You know that. We play on a Saturday this year like we did last year. So that could easily be a Tell the Truth Sunday. Whatever the case may be, they need to hear it. He's like, we don't run from it. This ain't one of those, hey, burn that. We don't even need to go. No. We going through every aspect of that foolishness that was our game on Friday. We're going to get to the bottom of it. We're going to talk about all of it. Good, bad, ugly, everything. And he talked about the growth of Mikey Sainristil on and off the field. And I loved it. He talked about Mikey's growth on the field from how smart he is, how instinctive he is, him having to play outside last year to now going back inside and how that's helped him. He talked about off the field, him being a leader and a guy that is now someone that can be vocal, someone that can set an example for how things need to be done. And I wouldn't be shocked if we get to the postseason, when we get to the postseason this year. When they pick their 5 captains, I wouldn't be shocked if Mikey Sainristil is one of the 5 captains on the roster that they pick for the playoffs to walk out for the coin toss. If I'm not mistaken, every single one of the dudes that was a captain last year is still here. So I don't know if they're replacing somebody or if they're just going to add another guy. I don't know how many captains you can have. I would imagine 5 is a lot. I don't know if you need to go past 5. But just thinking last year it was Jaden, Zach Ertz, Bobby Wagner, Terry McLaurin, and Jeremy Reeves. They're all still here. All of them still well respected within the locker room. All still captains, I would presume, if we get to the when we get to the postseason. But I feel like Mikey is ascending in that realm, and his voice is getting louder. And I can see him being one of those guys moving forward. Run defense in the preseason. They asked him, was he pleased with what he saw? Was he disappointed? He's like, I'm not going to throw a blanket over it. There were certain aspects that I liked. He said there was a run fit between Jacob Martin, Noah Igbenogany, and Percy Butler that I absolutely love. It's teaching tape. I showed the players. That's what we want. But everything didn't look like that, clearly. We still have issues with these guys that are depth pieces and controlling the edge, setting the edge, not letting runs get to the perimeter, filling the alley, coming down, making tackles, everyone getting where they're supposed to be, and not allowing these big gash runs to the perimeter. Every time the Patriots needed a run in the red zone inside the 5, they tried to run up the middle. They couldn't get in. They just tossed it to the outside, and they got in every single time. I think 3 of their rushing touchdowns in the game came on like 3rd or 4th down, where they just said, hey, let's just pitch this bitch to the outside because we know we can get in. They can't stop us. So it's still a problem. And he said, I don't want to put a blanket over it, but we did some good things, but there's still some things that we got to clean up. So that was DQ's presser yesterday. Jaden Daniels. He talked about being a competitor and wanting to play. He's like, look, I don't control, when I play and when I don't play. If it were up to me, I would play every game. But, the competitor in me wants to play. But, I trust DQ and AP and the decisions that they make. Ben Stanley tried to get him to reminisce about last season. And the one thing I do love about this group is that it's been pretty consistent when it comes to talking about last year. They don't. Like Zach Ertz, they tried to ask him about last year. Zach's like, it's last year's last year. I don't have nothing to say about last year. They tried to ask Bobby Wagner about last year. Bobby's like, that's last year, bro. Why y'all still talking to me about last year? Let us do that. Let the fans still talk about last year and all that. The players need to be focused on this upcoming season. What's done is done. And they try to ask Jaden about the Cincinnati game, obviously because we're playing Cincinnati in the preseason this upcoming week. So they wanted him to reminisce and reflect on the game that really proved to be his breakout game when the star was born, was that Monday night coming out party against the Bengals, out-dueling Joe Burrow. And he's like, that was last year, bro. I don't have anything to say about last year. We on to this year, straight up. Love it. He talked about working with the wide receiver group because they haven't been great, obviously, outside of Debo to this point. And so he's like, we all got jobs to do. My job. And here's, again, another unintended consequence of having dudes who can't separate, who ain't like that at the receiver position. It's forced Jaden to have to be even more pinpoint accurate with the football, which is a good thing, right? So he was like, we all got jobs to do. He said, my job is to put the football where it needs to be. And I'm just trying to do that to the best of my abilities. Translation, I'm going to try to, dot these boys up because I know they ain't getting no separation. And my job is to put it in a place where they can make the play and nobody else can. And he's been doing a good job of that. It's going to help his accuracy, if nothing else. He was asked a non-football question. And I love this question. And I loved Jaden's response because it's true to who he is. He said, what has changed the most? They asked him what has changed the most from this time last year to this time this year. And, obviously winning Offensive Rookie of the Year, having one of the most, if not the most recognizable play in the NFL last year, taking your team 60 minutes, who, again, hadn't been in that position in over 30 plus years, taking them within 60 minutes of the Super Bowl in your rookie season, becoming a phenomenon league-wide, it changes things, clearly. And he said, and he said it with a smile. So, like he understands. And he said, I understand, what this entails and what it means. And I'm appreciative of all the love and support that I get. But I'm an introvert. And so places I used to go, things I used to do, can't really do them anymore without people recognizing me. And it kind of, it bothers me a little bit because he's uncomfortable in those situations. I get that. As a fellow lurker and pseudo introvert myself, I love that he acknowledges, like, I love the attention, I love the support and all that, but if I'm just being honest and I'm staying true to who I am, all of this shit kind of makes me uncomfortable, and you can tell, like, he's just a cool, laid back, chill guy. Like, I really don't, want all of this extra stuff that comes with it. And boy, do I get that shit or what? Ball placement. He talked about ball placement, and it goes back to his answer when he talked about working with the wide receiver group. He talked about, the ball placement being something that he has really strived to be better at this year. I think he has had to be because of the group that he's throwing the football to. And even when it's a dot, they still don't catch it. See Chris Moore on Friday, right? Twice. See KJ Osborne Friday, right? Even when it's a dot, doesn't mean they're going to catch it, but at least you did your job, right? He talked about his rapport with Debo. Basically, he said that they've built a really good, strong rapport throughout the spring and into the summer. They've really gotten a lot of time on task, and I've talked about that being an unintended consequence of the Noah Brown recovery and Terry being out. How that has really, I think, fast-tracked that dynamic between the two. There was another question, a few questions later, about Debo and when he knew that their connection had gotten to a point where they could flourish. And he was like, the very first throw of training camp, which was the fade to Debo on Tyler Owens for the touchdown. He said, from that point forward, I knew we got something here, and we just got to continue to hone in on it, continue to work, but we got something. And we've basically heard every day of camp, and even in the joint practice, Debo caught another touchdown from Jaden Daniels. We've heard that these two continue to be strong in camp, and that's what we need, right? In the face of this wide receiver adversity, we've got one guy that is standing up and holding us down, and that's Debo. And for now, it's okay. But when you get to the regular season, we're going to need more than that, obviously. So he was asked about the receiver position. Again, I told you this is why it's a problem, because it's a thing. It's a real thing. It's glaring. Everybody can see it. He said, look, on that, I can control what I can control. And he said that for everything. Not playing in the preseason. They asked him about Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and all these guys playing in the preseason, and you not playing in the preseason. And he's like, I'm going to control what I can control. I love that answer. I love it. I ain't got nothing to do with me. I don't care what Mahomes is doing. They ain't got nothing to do with me. I don't care what Joe Burrow and company are doing. They ain't got nothing to do with me. My situation is here in Washington, and what my coaches decide I'm going to do and what's the best for me is what I'm going to do. He talked about his relationship with Mikey Sainristil, which we know that's one of his best friends on the team. I would go out and say between Bobby and Mikey, those are his two guys, but Bobby's more like a big bro. Mikey is more like, we grew up, we the same age. There's a different bond with, brothers and sisters that are of the same age or close to it than your older siblings who might be already out the house, or, you in elementary school, they in high school. So y'all relationship ain't the closest. Y'all got a relationship. It just ain't the closest. Like somebody that's 2 grades away from you, or, 1 or 2 years older than you. Y'all got a different bond because y'all grew up doing everything, taking baths together, doing everything together, right? So I think Mikey is more of that for him than Bobby is. I think Mikey is like one of his best friends on the team. And he basically was like, yeah, we talk ish to each other, but we also talk about, you know, things that we see. Say one of the things I don't think Mikey gets enough credit for is how smart he is as a defender. You know, he's very anticipatory and he gets things and he sees things. And so we pick each other's brain. And he's like, yeah, that's my bro, man. That's fam right there. The growth of the offense, he talked about, you know, where it's grown from the, you know, the start of camp, or rather the start of the offseason to where they are now. And he talked about how they've taken steps to get to where they want to be. The beauty of it is with the guys that were here last year, it's year 2. So he talked about being able to make certain calls or certain checks at the line of scrimmage. Because he talked about Tyler Biotish and their relationship and how they kind of play off of each other. Biotish at one point might see something, make a call. Jaden may see something, make a call. They talk about it afterwards. So they're on the same page. We've heard instances this camp where one in particular, Ben Sinnott was at tight end. The defense was bringing a blitz. Jaden looked at him, gave him a signal. They were on the same page. Ben changed his route up to a seam. Jaden was able to hit him for a sizable gain. And it's that kind of growth that you're seeing from the offense. And he talked about that. The red zone offense, he said, look, we're not game planning because, yes, there have been struggles, especially the way the question was framed. There's been struggles, but he's like, we're not game planning for anyone. And he wanted to say, we ain't got all our dudes out there, but can't use that excuse, right? But that's a part of it. I'm not going to be throwing to Ja'Cory Brooks come September. Not going to be throwing to Chris Moore come September. That helps, right? A lot. So he was like, you know, we just continue to try to get better day in, day out, and continue to grow in that aspect. So that was Jaden at the podium after practice yesterday. We'll hear from Dan Quinn, or we've already heard from Dan Quinn today. I'll go back and listen. But I'm excited to hear from the 2 rookies. I'm hoping that there's enough questions for them and enough answers from them that I know Kane will talk. I'm not sure if Jalen Lane's going to talk all that much. I'm hoping that these are longer than 4 minutes and some change, 5 minutes. Let me get 7 minutes out of both of them. That'd be nice. But usually with the rookies, they're in and out. They don't have a lot to say. So those will probably be quick in and out pressers. But I'm actually interested to see what the young fellas have to say after their first NFL experience in the first preseason game versus the Patriots. So with that said, that is today's show. Dom Hampton, that big news cut. Didn't see that one coming, to be honest with you. Not surprised from this standpoint that he didn't look good in the preseason game, but they didn't cut him because he didn't look good in the preseason game. They cut him because he hadn't moved the needle all summer. And that preseason performance was just the final tipping point. And it's disappointing because it's a guy you drafted. It's a guy you had high hopes for, but it just didn't work out. You know, it didn't work out. So you move on. They signed Duke Riley. They signed a couple of corners. We'll see how those guys factor in. I think that's more of, hey, we need guys to get in here because our starters, they're not playing, but maybe a quarter and a half max. I doubt they play the whole first half. You know, if the first 2 possessions look good for the starting defense, which I can't imagine that they will because they're playing Cincinnati's ones, and I can't imagine that the first team defense goes out there and looks lights out against that group. But I imagine that if the offense goes out there, scores on 2 possessions, they're done. Maybe even 1. They go out there, score a touchdown, walk it down the field, and score. They may be done. I think they're going to be out there multiple possessions though, like 2 possessions, and then they'll shut them down. Same with the defense, whether they get stops or not. It might be 2-3 possessions for them, and then they're done. And then you need guys to finish the rest of the game. And with the injuries that they sustain, you got one guy in concussion protocol. You had another guy put on IR. They just cut Allen George. So that's 3 corners you're down, assuming that Bobby Price isn't back for this game. And he's in protocol, and he hit his head pretty good on the turf, man. Yikes. You're down 3 corners. So to sign 2 makes a ton of sense. We'll see if Bobby Price can get back in. But even if he can't, for Monday's game, he should be back by the time they play the Ravens, you would hope. And because they're not going to play any of their starters in that game. So you need all hands on deck for that game. But you should be able to get through the rest of the game, you would think, with the 2 guys they signed and the depth of the rest of the guys that are going to be there. Carlin Biggers, who had his moments on Friday, et cetera, et cetera. So Dom Hampton cut. I think that just puts the rest of that 2024 draft class on notice that, hey, especially if you're a day 3 guy, I can't see them doing anything with Jordan McGee or Javonte Jean-Baptiste, but Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a 7th round pick. I think he's on notice at this point. Hey, if you can't get healthy, bruh, we might have to go in a different direction. Now, we'll bring you back on the practice squad because we still think there's some promise there, but we ain't got time. We ain't got time. So we'll see. Hopefully those guys get back on the practice field this week at some point and are able to play in the game on Monday, but they're not going to push any of those dudes, and they shouldn't. The goal is to get them ready for September the 7th, not August the 18th. So I'm not tripping. Neither should you, but of course we want to see these guys. But anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me. Your man Louie T here on Training Camp Confidential. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. Hopefully I will see you guys a little bit later on this evening. If need be, we'll see what transpired. Again, it was another light practice similar to yesterday. So today's like a glorified walkthrough, so to speak. So I don't think there's going to be a ton of takeaways from today's action. We won't have real practice until Tuesday, tomorrow, when they'll have their pads on. More likely than not, it'll be a fully padded practice. Then they get a day off on Wednesday. And then, we'll kind of see where we are after that as far as ramping up for that Monday night game against Cincinnati. So until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and we will be back possibly later on this evening. If not, I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.